The words, "Pack your bags, freeloader," still echo in my mind, as clear as if they were shouted just moments ago. I can still see her standing there, my daughter-in-law, Stephanie, with her manicured hand pointing toward the door, her voice sharp enough to slice through the air. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I stood frozen, clutching the edge of the kitchen counter as my son, Ethan, looked away, pretending to be too busy scrolling on his phone to intervene. It's strange, how a home you helped build can turn into a place where you no longer belong. After my husband passed, Ethan insisted I move in with them. "It'll be easier for you, Mom," he'd said. "You shouldn't live alone." And I believed him. For 2 years, I paid half the bills, cooked their meals, and took care of their little boy Mason. I didn't see myself as a burden. I was family. But that changed the moment Stephanie's parents offered to help them renovate the house. Ever since the new furniture arrived, so did her new attitude. Suddenly, she started treating me like some relic that didn't match her modern aesthetic. The curtains I picked were replaced. The pictures of my late husband disappeared from the hallway. And when I asked where they'd gone, she just smiled and said, "You'll find them in the attic." They didn't fit the vibe. Still, I stayed quiet. For Ethan's sake. For Mason's sake. But that morning, something inside me broke. Stephanie had organized a family brunch, which apparently didn't include me. I found out when her friend Heather arrived and said, "Oh, I didn't realize your mother-in-law lived with you. I thought she just visits sometimes." The way Stephanie laughed made my stomach twist. "Yeah, well," she said, sipping her mimosa. "She's been between places for a while." Between places? I paid the electric bill last week. After her friends left, she cornered me in the kitchen. "You need to start packing," she said flatly. "We've decided it's time for you to move out." I blinked at her, unsure I'd heard correctly. "Move out?" "But Ethan agrees," she interrupted. "He just doesn't want to say it because, guilt." I turned to look at my son, standing a few feet away, silent. That silence hurt more than her words ever could. She crossed her arms. "You don't pay rent. You don't contribute enough to justify staying. You eat our food, use our water, and—" I cut her off. "Your food? Your water? I pay half the utilities. I cook for your family every single day. I pick Mason up from school when you're too busy to—" "Oh, please," she scoffed. "You think babysitting makes you useful? He's my son, not your little project." That did it. The tremble in my chest steadied, replaced by a strange, quiet calm. "All right," I said softly. "If that's how you feel." Her smirk widened, mistaking my calm for defeat. "Good. I'll need your room cleared out by the weekend." Ethan looked at me, his lips parting slightly as if he wanted to speak, but then he didn't. He just looked down again. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and thought about everything. About the years I'd spent supporting Ethan after college, the money I'd poured into this very home, my late husband's savings, the down payment we'd given as a gift when they bought it. I still had the paperwork tucked away in a folder in my drawer. They thought I was powerless, some fragile widow with nowhere else to go. But what they didn't know was that this house, their house, wasn't exactly theirs. Because years ago, when Ethan and Stephanie were just starting out and couldn't secure a mortgage on their own, I'd stepped in as the guarantor and part owner. My name was on every single document. They didn't know that. They never cared to read beyond the signature page. And as I sat there, staring at the framed photo of my husband on the nightstand, I whispered, "Looks like it's time to remind them." By morning, I had a plan. It wasn't loud or vengeful. It was quiet, deliberate, the kind of revenge that comes wrapped in paperwork and signatures, not shouting matches. But first, I needed to make her believe she'd won. "Stephanie," I said at breakfast, "you were right. I should have left a while ago. I'll be out by Friday." She smiled that fake sweet smile of hers. "That's very mature of you." Ethan gave me a small nod. One I couldn't read. Guilt, maybe, or relief. But what none of them knew was that my first call after breakfast wasn't to a moving company. It was to my lawyer, Mr. Delgado, The same man who'd helped me and my late husband secure the mortgage years ago. When he picked up, his familiar voice eased the knot in my chest. "Ah, Mrs. Harlow, it's been a long time." "It has," I said, "and I think it's time we reviewed some old documents." By the end of that call, I wasn't just a guest in that house anymore. I was a woman holding the deed to her freedom and their downfall. The days that followed were a strange mix of calm and chaos. Stephanie strutted around the house like she'd already reclaimed her kingdom. She ordered new curtains, rearranged furniture, and even began showing off my old room on a video call with her mother. I could hear her say, "Once she's out, we'll turn this into Mason's playroom. Finally, some space that doesn't smell like mothballs." I didn't say a word. I packed a few boxes, enough to make it look convincing. Inside, I neatly folded my late husband's sweaters. The one she always complained smelled too sentimental. I took only what I needed. The rest, I left exactly where it was. Ethan avoided me like a guilty teenager. When he passed me in the hallway, he'd mumble half-hearted greetings and quickly disappear. One evening, I caught him standing in the doorway, watching me tape a box shut. "Mom," he said softly, "I didn't mean for it to happen like this." I looked up at him, my fingers pressing the tape firmly. "Didn't mean for what, Ethan? For me to be thrown out of my own home?" He winced. "It's not like that." "Then what's it like?" I asked, standing slowly. "Because from where I'm standing, your wife just called me a freeloader and you didn't say a word." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You know how Stephanie gets. I just didn't want to make it worse." "Worse for whom?" I asked. "Her or me?" He didn't answer. And in that silence, I realized I'd lost him. Not to death, but to weakness. After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed and smiled for the first time in weeks. Not a happy smile, but one filled with quiet certainty. They thought they were getting rid of me, but soon they'd learn what it truly meant to lose something they took for granted. By Thursday morning, I received a call from Mr. Delgado. His tone was professional, but I could sense a hint of amusement beneath it. "Mrs. Harlow," he said, "after reviewing the documents, it appears you still hold a 50% ownership stake in the property. It was never refinanced or transferred." "Meaning?" I asked, though I already knew. "Meaning," he replied, "they cannot legally evict you. In fact, if you choose to sell your share, they would either need to buy you out or vacate the property. The decision would rest entirely in your hands." I leaned back in my chair, a slow warmth spreading through me. That's exactly what I needed to hear. That evening, I decided to play my part one last time. Over dinner, Stephanie chattered about new paint colors and fresh starts. Mason sat quietly, drawing on a napkin. I reached across the table, touching his tiny hand. "You'll come visit Grandma, won't you?" He nodded eagerly. "Can I bring my dinosaur toys?" I smiled. "Of course, sweetheart. You can bring all of them." Stephanie's eyes narrowed. "Visit? Where exactly are you going?" "Oh," I said casually, slicing into my chicken. "Just somewhere peaceful. Don't worry about it." She smirked, thinking she'd finally gotten rid of me. "Well, I wish you the best, Mrs. Harlow. It's time we all moved on." "Indeed," I said softly. The next morning, before the sun even rose, I loaded my car with the few boxes I'd packed and drove to Mr. Delgado's office. We finalized the paperwork that afternoon. I didn't sell my share. I transferred ownership, but not to them. See, I'd recently met a nice couple at church, retirees who were looking for a smaller home closer to their grandchildren. I told them about my situation, and their eyes lit up. "If you're serious about selling your portion," the husband said, "we'd be more than happy to partner with you. We'll handle the rest legally." And that's what we did. Within 48 hours, half the house belonged to them. They moved in that Saturday morning, just as Stephanie was hosting her farewell brunch with her friends. I wish I could have captured the look on her face when the moving truck pulled up. She stormed outside, apron still on, waving her arms. "Excuse me, who are you people?" The man smiled kindly. "Oh, you must be Stephanie. We're the new co-owners. Lovely neighborhood, by the way." Her jaw dropped. "Co-owners? That's impossible. This house belongs to us." "Actually," I said, stepping out of my car behind them, It belongs to us. Half of it, to be precise. Her face drained of color. What? What are you talking about? I handed her a folder, the deed, signed, stamped, and very much legal. You might want to read the fine print next time you try to evict someone. Ethan came running out, his voice trembling. Mom, what did you do? What you should have done, I said, my tone calm but firm. Stand up for what's right. Stephanie snatched the papers and began flipping through them, her hands shaking. This can't be real. Oh, it's real, I said, smiling faintly. And here's the best part. You can either pay me fair market value for my share, or live with your new housemates. The couple behind me waved cheerfully. We'll be unpacking the guest room, the woman said. Stephanie's eyes widened. You can't be serious. I'm perfectly serious, I said. But don't worry, I won't stay here. I'll let my new friends handle the living arrangements. They seem far more civil than you. Ethan ran his hand through his hair, defeated. Mom, please. I turned to him, my heart aching but my resolve firm. You let her throw me out like I was nothing. Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to lose something you thought was yours. For once, Stephanie didn't have a comeback. She just stood there, trembling, as the sound of the moving truck's engine filled the silence. Later that evening, as I watched from the car parked across the street, I saw them arguing on the porch. Ethan paced back and forth while Stephanie shouted, pointing at the papers. Mason peeked from behind the curtains, his little face confused. I whispered softly, One day, sweetheart, you'll understand. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity, the one thing they tried to strip away. That night, I stayed at a small motel on the edge of town. The place smelled faintly of lavender and old wood polish, and for the first time in a long while, I slept without the weight of humiliation pressing on my chest. When I woke up, sunlight streamed through the curtains, and I felt free. I made myself a cup of motel coffee, bitter, watery, but strangely satisfying, and opened my phone. A dozen missed calls from Ethan, 3 from Stephanie. I didn't answer any of them. Let them sit in the mess they created. By noon, Mr. Delgado called again. Mrs. Harlow, he said, I just wanted to inform you that the new co-owners have officially filed the occupancy documents. It's all recorded with the county. Good, I said, sipping my coffee. That house needed new energy anyway. He chuckled softly. You handled this with remarkable restraint. Restraint? I smiled. I call it seasoning. The same patience I use in my recipes. Slow, deliberate, and best served when the flavor has matured. That weekend, I drove to the park where I used to take Mason when he was little. I sat on a bench near the duck pond, feeding breadcrumbs to the water's surface, and thought about everything that had happened. For years, I'd lived my life serving others. My husband, my son, his wife. I'd cooked, cleaned, hosted, and held families together with quiet hands. But somewhere along the line, they stopped seeing me as a person. I became an accessory, part of the furniture, the background noise of their comfort, until they pushed me too far. And now, for once, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. 3 days later, Ethan showed up at the motel. His car pulled in slowly, headlights off, as if he were sneaking into a place he wasn't supposed to be. When he knocked on the door, I already knew it was him. Mom, please, he said as soon as I opened it. You can't do this. You've turned my life upside down. I raised an eyebrow. I did? He sighed, stepping inside. Stephanie's been in tears all week. The new couple, they're everywhere. They rearrange the living room. They play country music in the morning. Sounds cozy, I said. It's chaos, he blurted. They even invited their grandkids over. Mason doesn't understand what's happening. He keeps asking why Grandma's not home. That last part made my heart ache a little, but I stayed firm. I told you, Ethan. You made a choice. You let her disrespect me in my own home. Actions have consequences. He rubbed his temples. I get it, okay? I messed up. But can't we work something out? I sat on the bed and looked at him quietly. When your father was alive, he warned me that you'd need to learn the hard way. He said, don't rescue him from his own lessons. It's the only way he'll grow. Ethan's voice softened. Dad wouldn't want this, Mom. No, I said. But he'd understand it. For a long moment, silence filled the room, heavy but not cruel. Finally, I stood and handed him a small envelope. Here, I said. He frowned. What's this? The new agreement. If you and Stephanie can buy out my share at market value, the house will be fully yours again. His shoulders sagged with relief. So you'll sell? Maybe, I said, but not until you both understand what that home really meant, and who made it one. He looked confused. What do you mean? You think that house was just wood and walls, I said softly. But it wasn't. Every corner, every smell, every sound, that was me. My food, my care, my laughter with Mason. You let someone convince you that your foundation was a burden. Ethan swallowed hard, eyes glistening. I'm sorry, Mom. I know, I said gently. But sorry doesn't cook dinner. It doesn't build respect. So until I see change, the papers stay with me. He nodded slowly, defeated. Okay, I understand. As he turned to leave, I added, Tell Mason I'll see him soon. Maybe we'll bake cookies together. At my place this time. He smiled faintly, then left. When the door closed, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The truth was, I didn't want to punish him. I wanted to teach him. Sometimes, life's hardest recipes need a little bitterness before the sweetness sets in. Over the next few weeks, I started rebuilding my life in small, deliberate ways. I rented a cozy cottage near the market square, one with ivy climbing the walls and a wide kitchen window. I began baking again, experimenting with old recipes, adding my own touch. Word spread fast. Soon, a few neighbors started dropping by for just a taste. And before long, I had a small side business, Harlow's Hearth and Oven. One morning, as I kneaded dough, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. Ethan, we bought out the couple. The house is finally quiet again. Mason misses you. We all do. I smiled, wiping flour from my hands. Me. That's good to hear. Tell Mason Grandma's kitchen always has a spot for him. 2 hours later, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, there stood Ethan, tired but sincere, and beside him, Mason holding a jar of honey. Grandma! Mason shouted, running into my arms. We made pancakes, but they don't taste like yours. I laughed softly, hugging him tight. That's because mine have a secret ingredient. What is it? He asked, eyes wide. Forgiveness, I whispered. Ethan looked down, tears glinting in his eyes. Mom, I don't deserve this. I placed a hand on his cheek. Maybe not yet, but you're trying, and that's where healing starts. That afternoon, we cooked together. Flour on the counters, laughter in the air, sunlight spilling across the walls, the way it used to be. When Mason bit into his cookie, he grinned. Now this tastes like home. I smiled. Exactly, sweetheart. And in that moment, I realized something. I hadn't lost my home at all. I'd simply carried it with me. In every recipe, every act of love, every ounce of patience that the world had mistaken for weakness. Some homes aren't built from bricks. They're built from heart. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well enough that your peace becomes your loudest answer. A week passed after that quiet afternoon, and my heart finally began to unclench. It was strange, really, how peace doesn't arrive with fireworks or applause. It just slips in quietly, like sunlight through half-closed curtains, and suddenly you realize the storm has passed. I was standing in my little kitchen one morning, rolling dough for cinnamon bread, when the doorbell rang again. I wiped my hands on my apron, expecting maybe a customer or a curious neighbor, but it was Stephanie. Her eyes were red-rimmed, makeup smudged, hair uncharacteristically unkempt. She clutched a small gift bag in both hands, like it was her last line of defense. "May I come in?" she asked softly. For a second, I thought of closing the door. But something in her tone, fragile, exhausted, human, stopped me. I stepped aside. Of course. She walked in and stood near the counter, looking around. "It smells amazing," she whispered. "Cinnamon and healing," I said with a half smile. She let out a shaky laugh. You always have to make everything sound poetic. I've lived long enough to know words shape how we taste the world, I replied. She nodded slowly, then placed the gift bag on the counter. I came to say I'm sorry. I didn't answer immediately. I poured her a cup of tea and gestured for her to sit. The silence between us was thick, not angry, but heavy with everything unsaid. Finally, she spoke. When I said those things to you, about freeloading, about being in the way, I was angry, but not really at you. I was angry at my own life. I tilted my head slightly, studying her. Go on. She sighed. I thought marrying Ethan meant security, happiness, purpose. But when the bills started piling up and the house repairs came, I felt trapped. You were so calm about everything, so unshaken, and I resented that. It made me feel small. Her voice cracked. So, I lashed out, and I took it out on you. I stayed quiet for a long moment. Then I said gently, You know, Stephanie, strength doesn't make others small. It invites them to rise. She wiped her tears. You have every right to hate me, but I can't stand the thought of Mason growing up thinking his grandma and mom hate each other. I smiled softly. Hate is heavy. I don't carry it anymore. Her eyes widened. You forgive me? I do, I said simply. Because if I don't, the bitterness stays in my kitchen, and I can't bake sweetness out of resentment. She laughed through her tears. You really do turn everything into a metaphor. Occupational hazard, I teased. She reached into the bag and pulled out a small framed photo. It was of Mason, holding a sign that said, We miss Grandma's cookies. My chest tightened. I touched the frame gently. He's growing so fast. He talks about you every day, Stephanie said quietly. He tells everyone his grandma has magic hands. I felt my eyes glisten. He's right, you know. But it's not magic, it's love measured in tablespoons. She stood, hesitated, and then hugged me. It was awkward at first, stiff, uncertain, but then it softened. Thank you, she whispered. Go home, I murmured. Cook something simple. Sit with Ethan. And remember, homes don't fall apart because of bad walls. They fall apart because people stop listening. She nodded, tears rolling freely now. I'll try. After she left, I sat by the window for a while, watching the clouds drift lazily across the morning sky. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from an unknown number. Unknown. Hey, Mrs. Harlow. My wife and I bought your old house. Everyone says you're the one who made it special. Would you consider coming by sometime? Maybe give us a few tips. We're terrible cooks. I chuckled softly. Looks like the house is in good hands, I muttered. I typed back. Only if you promise not to overbake the biscuits. And keep the window open when you fry onions. That's non-negotiable. As Revensis. The reply came with a smile emoji and a deal. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of chamomile tea and looked at the stars. The air was cool, fragrant with pine and distant rain. I thought about how easily life can shift. One insult, one choice, one act of quiet defiance, and how those moments reveal who we really are. People think revenge is about breaking others, but I've learned it's about rebuilding yourself so beautifully that those who wronged you have no power left to define your story. A few days later, Ethan invited me to dinner. Just us, he said, no surprises. I went. When I arrived, the table was neatly set, candles flickering. Mason ran up with his usual grin, dragging me toward the kitchen. Grandma, Daddy made your stew. I blinked in surprise. He did? Ethan scratched the back of his neck. Well, I tried. Don't expect miracles. I tasted it, a bit too salty but warm, familiar. Not bad, I said. You remembered the time. He smiled shyly. I remember everything you taught me, Mom. I just forgot what it meant for a while. We ate, we laughed, we remembered. And when dinner was done, Ethan handed me a small envelope. For you, he said. Inside was a check, not a massive amount, but enough to show effort. It's the first payment, he said, for the buyout. I looked at him for a long time. You know, you don't have to rush this. I'm not waiting to collect. He shook his head. I need to do this. For me, for my family, and for you. I nodded, pride swelling quietly in my chest. Then I'll hold you to it. As I drove home that night, streetlights flickering across the windshield, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. The ache had melted into understanding, a slow, golden warmth that filled the space's bitterness once claimed. Maybe, I thought, the real glow-up isn't about changing how others see you. It's about reclaiming your own reflection, the one you forgot was there all along. I smiled to myself. They called me a freeloader, I whispered, but I was the foundation all along. And for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged, not to a house, not to their approval, but to myself. The morning light fell softly across my living room, spilling warmth over the wooden floor. I had just finished setting a batch of cinnamon rolls to cool when I heard the faint sound of laughter outside. A small, familiar voice calling my name. Grandma! Mason stood by the gate, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders as he waved with both hands. Stephanie stood behind him, holding a container. I stepped out, brushing the flour off my apron, heart lifting just a little. What's this surprise? I asked. Mason grinned wide. Mom made cookies, but I helped. We wanted you to try them. I opened the container and looked down at a dozen lumpy, misshapen cookies. They were too brown on the edges, unevenly sized. But the smell, sweet butter and chocolate, was perfect. I took a bite. Delicious, I said, smiling at Mason. They taste like teamwork. Stephanie laughed softly. Well, the teamwork part was mostly him keeping me from burning the kitchen down. I looked at her, really looked, and saw how the tension that once lived behind her eyes had softened. There were still shadows, yes, but they were the kind you get from learning, not from anger. She shifted awkwardly. Ethan's out fixing the car. He wanted to come, but I told him I'd handle the diplomacy. Ah, I teased. So, this is a peace mission? She smiled. Something like that. We sat together on the porch steps, Mason chasing butterflies near the fence. The silence between us this time wasn't heavy. It was gentle, the kind that hums with mutual understanding. After a few minutes, she said, You know, I used to think you judged me, that you looked down on me for not being like you. Calm, capable, always in control. I hated that feeling. I turned to her. I never judged you, Stephanie, but I did see you struggling, and I hoped you'd find your own rhythm instead of fighting mine. She looked down. I guess I did the hard way. Sometimes the hard way is the only way that sticks, I said softly. She exhaled deeply. I want you to come back. Not to live with us, not yet, but to dinner, to Mason's school play, to us. I know we broke a lot, but maybe it's time to rebuild. I studied her face, the sincerity in her tone. You don't rebuild a bridge overnight, I said gently, but you start with one plank. Her lips curved in a small, hopeful smile. Then let's start. We shook hands, not just as family, but as two women who had walked through fire and found something stronger on the other side. That night, I found myself standing by my window again, watching the faint shimmer of city lights far beyond the trees. I thought about everything, the words, the wounds, the small redemptions that had stitched the edges of my life back together. I realized then that life doesn't hand you peace wrapped in ribbons. You craft it yourself, in the quiet decisions, in the moments you choose to rise instead of react, in the strength to walk away without bitterness. A few days later, I visited the old house. The new owners were outside painting the fence, their little girl chasing bubbles across the lawn. Mrs. Harlow, the woman waved. We've been waiting for you. I smiled, walking up the path that used to be mine. The porch smelled of fresh paint and roses. You've made it beautiful, I said. It was already beautiful, she replied. We just added color. Inside, everything looked different, yet somehow familiar. The light still fell in the same soft angle through the kitchen window. The same spot where I used to knead dough and hum old tunes now had a vase of wildflowers. She showed me the oven. We followed your recipe from the note you left in the drawer, she said. It worked like a charm. I laughed. That recipe's been in my family for 3 generations. I'm glad it's feeding someone new. Before leaving, I looked back one last time at the kitchen, my old world. Then I whispered under my breath, "Be kind to them." Outside, I took a deep breath. The air was lighter now. Weeks passed, and my bakery grew busier. People came from nearby towns, curious about the grandma who turned heartbreak into cookies. I never confirmed the stories they whispered, but I didn't deny them either. Some truths taste better when left mysterious. One afternoon, a reporter asked me, "Do you ever regret walking away from your old home?" I smiled, looking at the trays of bread cooling by the window. "No," I said, "because sometimes losing a house teaches you how to build a life." She scribbled that quote down, eyes bright. "That's beautiful." "It's just the truth," I replied. "Forgiveness is the yeast of peace. It makes everything rise." That evening, as the last customer left and the golden light of sunset filled the room, I sat by the counter, sipping tea. My phone buzzed again. A photo message from Ethan. It was Mason, standing proudly in front of his school project, a model of a house made of cardboard and glue. The caption read, "This is Grandma's Bakery, where happy smells come from." Tears welled up in my eyes. I whispered to myself, maybe that's all I ever wanted, to leave behind something warm. I leaned back, feeling the calm hum of the oven, the scent of bread and hope blending in the air. Outside, the world went on, messy, unpredictable, alive. I thought of that night they threw me out, of Stephanie's cruel words echoing through the dark, and then I thought of where I was now, free, fulfilled, whole. Revenge had never been about money or pride. It was about turning pain into proof that I could rise higher, shine brighter, and love deeper despite it all. I smiled faintly and whispered, "They told me to pack my bags." And I did. I just didn't tell them I was packing for a better life. And as the last ray of sun disappeared behind the hill, I knew truly, deeply, that I had finally come home.